Hey there guys, happy Monday. As promised, I am back with a From the Notebook that sort of continues a conversation that Michaela and I were having in our live stream on last Tuesday, where we're talking about genre hierarchy. At the end of the live stream, Michaela brought out different kinds of covers and how covers in YA are presented as like for girls or for guys, and she presented two books that were realistic stories, so not fantasy, not science fiction, and was showing off the difference between, you know, books packaged for boys and books packaged for girls. And I wanted to kind of expand that discussion today because if you pay attention to my Thesis Thursday post, then you might already know that my last thesis chapter was on YA book covers, and I kind of want to give you like a really quick, or an attempt at a really quick snapshot of what I have found within that research and talking about the state of YA book covers today. So the book that Michaela showed you guys at the end of the live stream was a contemporary romance novel, you know, for girls, kind of like this one. This is My Life Next Door by Huntley Fitzpatrick. And if you look at, you know, contemporary YA novels, they tend to all look like this because so many of them are romances. And this really hasn't changed too much over the course of that genre. Contemporary romance and contemporary YA novels are still like the most popular genre of YA. And yeah, they all really, if a bookstore happens to break them apart into, you know, contemporary like this, they all tend to look like this because they're all packaged like this, and they want you to know that you're getting something that is a contemporary romance. And yeah, they're just usually photographs, the couple of some kind, really nice artsy background. This one actually has less of a focus on the couple than I've seen a lot of them do. But yeah, so totally 100% agree with the fact that a lot of YA books look like this. A lot of interesting things are happening though in the design of today's fantasy and science fiction, like dystopia books, and I'm kind of going to get into that. But understanding that yes, a lot of YA looks like this. So the general claim among academics is that the young adult genre began with S.E. Hinton's The Outsiders. And the original kind of cover idea after that was this kind of a thing. This is The Book of Dragons by E. Nesbit, and this is a really old copy. This is technically kind of children's literature, but, you know, those genres were blended in and out for a really long time. YA sections didn't start showing up in bookstores until 2000-ish. So, yeah. So 1990s, 2000s. But they all were art covers for the most part, and they all depicted a scene from the book generally. So at least characters, if not scenes from books, and I don't know how well you can see that, but I haven't read this book, but I am assuming that this is a scene from the book, and that was the trend for a really, really long time. As graphics got better and better and better, they became photographs or they became really artsy representations, but for a really long time, the main focus was on representing the content that was inside the book. So when you looked at a cover, you would be seeing literally a snapshot of the author's writing brought to life in a picture. So some of the most recent stuff that I was reading suggested that after that, publishers really wanted some kind of a multi-genre, cross-cultural, gender-neutral kind of appeal to their covers, because they felt like only representing the characters inside might make, you know, girls more likely to pick it up, or boys. And so they really wanted to not gender their books in that way and do a more pictographic representation of their covers. And so this might actually seem really familiar. This is Graceling by Kristen Cashore, and like I said, there is no representation of what is inside this book. It's just, you know, this dagger where there's an eye here, and eyes are very important to the novel, but I honestly took a couple of years to realize that was even there. And so yeah, that is all that is there. There's like, you know, artsy kind of script around here. There's another dagger on the back with eyes, but you get a sense that it's fantasy from, you know, the tropes and the kind of, you know, designs on it, but there's no representation of what's actually inside the novel. And this came out in 2006, and that was the trend then, kind of. It didn't last very long. And so a lot of the stuff that I was reading, which was published back in, 2010, was saying that, there was this period of pictographic designs on covers that really didn't last very long because there was a real power to physically representing characters on covers. So if you are aware of what YA covers look like a lot right now, you're probably seeing where this is going, but hang on, we have to get through one of my least favorite periods of YA book covers. So the thesis that I read that was like a big linchpin in my paper talked about how the trend of the moment, and granted, remember this was published in 2010, was fragmentary body parts. And that might sound really weird, but you know what it looks like. It was that time when almost every book, no matter what it was, had some kind of body part-ish thing on the cover. And a lot of them were like this. This is Franny Billingsley's Chime. And obviously it's half of a face. So many books had halves of faces. This is Elizabeth May's The Falconer. This is the same kind of idea, but not as much focus on the face and more focus on the torso. There was also focuses on like hands. The original cover of Elizabeth Wine's Codename Verity had hands. Marissa Meyer's Cinder had a foot. So that's what this particular thesis was talking about, how so many books looked like this. And it was really bad. I mean, you would go up to like the shelf in Barnes & Noble and they would just look like this. And it would be really hard to decide what the book was supposed to be about. And the idea behind these fragmentary book covers was that instead of necessarily representing a character from the novel, which, I mean, yes, these are characters from the novel, but it was meant more for the YA reader to be able to input themselves into the cover. So like with this cover, for example, you see the shade of her hair and the bottom half of her face, but you might be able to imagine that it's you, and if your hair was a different color, that it's your face, or especially with, feet, hands, they're your feet, your hands. And they were saying that that was how they got readers, was to say, hey reader, you are a part of this novel. This cover is not just limited to the book, it is expanded to you as well. And I would also argue that that is when the intense gendering of YA picked back up, where YA was becoming primarily a female genre, because you don't see as much of this on male-focused covers. Most male-focused covers are still imagistic and artistic. The end of that thesis basically said, this is a problem, it needs to stop. It's, objectification of women's bodies, and we need a new kind of thing happening out there in the world. And this thesis had some statistics basically saying that out of all of the YA books that she did between the years 2003 and 2010, just about half of them looked like this, some kind of fragmentary body. And she really, really wanted that to change, because there's a lot of research out there that says that if you begin to piece apart a woman's body like that, it becomes, not going to get into that, don't have time. But anyways, here we go. I would also add to that mix that at the time there was a lot of covers that were just girls in dresses, and literally just girls in dresses. And sometimes that makes sense, like as in Kira Cass's The Selection, like that's important. This happens to be The Winter's Curse by Marie Rutkowski, which also these books just got a whole cover redo. So they don't really look like this anymore. I just happen to have this copy with me. But like the Fallen series by Lauren Kate, just girls in dresses that didn't really say anything whatsoever about the book. They were just a girl in a pretty dress, and I guess you were supposed to want to buy the dress and therefore buy the book. So you had the dress on the book, even though it didn't really relate. I don't know. I just got so sick and tired of seeing the half faces and the girls in dresses. It's just really, really bad. But that isn't brought up in the thesis. That's just like my own personal observation. So when I did my thesis, I pulled a bunch of books in the same way that this previous thesis did, and they were books from 2010, when she stopped doing her analysis, until 2015. And that is actually what that entire whiteboard is dedicated to. It is all of the data from what I did. And It's a mess and there's a lot to it, but I'm basically just going to say that if you took what I did at face value, you can say basically what you can say if you look at a general shelf in a Barnes & Noble right now, which is that, wow, cover art has gotten really, really interesting, and it's back, less photographs, more artistic, stuff like that. Like, I literally own prints of the Throne of Glass novels because this is so pretty. So pretty. And it's a really great play actually on the girls in dresses idea, because she's in full battle gear on the front and then she's in a dress in the back, which is really cool. And it's her whole body, so we really get to see Selena. And while this might not be necessarily a particular scene from the novel, it's definitely firmly anchored in her wardrobe and stuff like that. So this is definitely a character. I'm not necessarily meant to think that this is me, but I'm definitely meant to think that she is cool and I want to read about her. However, most of my analysis turned up that most YA books are back to something that all my previous research said was just a flash in the pan idea, and that is the imagistic kind of cover that we saw with Graceling. This is Seeker by Arwen Ellis Dayton, and honestly I think it's funny because it almost looks the same. We just have this, like, you know, kind of landscape down here with the dagger and the big typography, and I mean, just look at there's not a lot on this cover at all, and this book was published last year. So while, again, I'm making wide sweeping generalizations, but I'm not saying that every book looks like this, just the majority in my research, this is the trend that is back. And honestly, I'm not sure how much of this is due to that kind of, you know, crossing genres, crossing genders, crossing, you know, stuff like that. I honestly think that it's mostly because of how popular The Hunger Games was, because if you look at a lot of the research that I did, a lot of it was about how YA has to be extremely referential to what is popular at the moment, because YA is a cash crop. YA is produced to sell. YA is not necessarily produced to be good literature. It is produced to sell. And The Hunger Games is arguably doing even better than Twilight ever did. And Twilight didn't really have an anchored image. If anything, you could blame maybe some of that fragmentary body image on the first cover of Twilight, you know, the hands and the apple. But Hunger Games had the Mockingjay symbol, and that symbol is repeated on all the book covers and all the movie posters, which is an extremely, extremely big thing for advertising. That one anchoring image just says that is what that is. So yeah, maybe there is something about trying to make YA, you know, appeal to more genders, or appeal to more people, because remember, when all those characters were happening, all those half faces, girls in dresses, we're talking white, you know, typical beauty, not any kind of diversity in weight, skin tone, very, very little. So I don't know. I think my issue with a lot of these right now is that a lot of these do look the same. I was just looking at the cover to Marie Lu's Young Elites, and that's basically just typography. Like, in some ways, I feel like YA covers are trying really hard these days, and at other times, I just feel like they're slapping something on. And unfortunately, even though some covers are getting better, I would argue that the content inside is actually getting worse. And a lot of the articles that I read basically said that YA covers are meant to grab the reader and make you buy it, but after you buy it, it really doesn't matter. You know, the cover in a way is more important than the actual text inside. And to add on to that, people who buy YA books, you know, to publish are basically being told, buy something that will sell, buy something that looks like something that's popular and not necessarily something that's unique, because, you know, they aren't interested in unique, they're interested in the next big fad. Another issue between covers is that when you really break it down, you can see how different the covers are between authors that are debut authors and authors that are established, because the amount of work that goes into their covers is very, very different. Again, just bringing these back up. This was not Throne of Glass's first cover. The first cover to these was actually really crappy, but they got popular and now they look amazing. This is a debut, and there's no, like on here you have a blurb, you have New York Times bestselling series. On the back you have all of these really crazy accolades. And then you get to this, which is just kind of a really bland, kind of almost monochromatic cover with just like the one-liner, big typography, the author's name on the bottom. Bloomsbury identifies himself on the front of Throne of Glass, but the publisher here doesn't identify themselves here. And then on the back, there's just this. So not nearly as much work has gone into this cover as has gone into Sarah J. Maas's. And I mean, Secret has even been optioned for a movie, so meh. And that's, I think, why you see a lot of cover design very recently, because you have these books that people put, you know, effort behind, but might not have expected them to be as popular as they were. And then they do become popular. People are like, oh gosh, these covers are really bad. So they remake them, because covers did not used to be remade after only the first book was out, you know? That's so annoying to me when a book comes out and it's a really, you know, nice cover, I buy it, and then they redo the cover before the second book is even out, and all the rest of the books follow that cover scheme. You know, I have to rebuy that first book if I want to keep it on my shelf, because otherwise it just looks weird, you know? And based on the information that I got from all of this data, a lot of the covers that were remade based on the books that I looked at were the books that got unexpectedly popular or needed to be redone for certain other reasons that I can't go into right now. So that is my really, really fast and really, really crazy lowdown on what I've been looking at with YA book covers. I didn't get into anything nearly as in-depth as I wanted to, and I could have this conversation for days and do a 20-part series in this video, but I just wanted to kind of, after Michaela brought up the contemporary YA book as the stereotypical, you know, YA cover, I definitely wanted to address the history of YA book covers and why some things look like they do, and also what I've just been looking at. So I hope that you were interested in something, and if you want to continue this conversation, please talk to me down in the comments wherever you are, because this is really important to me and I have so much more to say, and there's so much more to say. And yeah, so I'm gonna stop now. I feel like I've been talking about a mile a minute. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Bye.